defense industrial base and the repatriation of American pharmaceutical manufacturing, both of these have to be in phase four. I mean, they have to be in phase four, whether it's forward appropriating the money for the Columbia class or the frigate, whatever. What do you see in phase four as must haves?
Well, I would agree that we need to send a strong signal to the defense industrial base right now, which was already brittle due to decades of disinvestment. And so I think the most obvious thing to do, and I hope the Navy will do it this week, is to award the future frigate as soon as possible. Of course, in Marinette, here in my district, we're offering what we believe to be the optimal model to base the future frigate off of. It's actually modeled off of a proven design, an Italian design. If you'll remember, the French contributed to the second strike against Assad over his use of chemical weapons. That was actually our frigate, the FREM, that did the shooting. And so for the overall health of the industrial base, and as a matter of national security, I think, we need to keep shipyards in the Midwest alive. The other thing we can do is move up the timeline to buy that second frigate. Currently, the plan is to award that in April 2021. We should move that up a year. And of course, we're going to have to buy more than the planned 20 right now. The actual number is closer to 50 or 70 if you want to get to a 355 ship fleet, if you want that high-low mix. The final thing I say, Hugh, is we know there is going to be increased pressure, downward pressure on defense spending as a result of the money we've had to spend to combat coronavirus. And in fact, with the whole budget going forward, the DoD and the Navy will have to get the most out of every dollar that's spent. And that's where the future frigate comes in. It was always supposed to be that platform that maximizes capabilities, being able to contribute to anti-air, anti-surface, anti-sub missions, but at a lower cost than destroyers and cruisers per platform. So I think we have an opportunity not only in a phase four bill to start sending a small signal, but over the longer term, getting creative and investing more in that high-low mix for the future naval fleet.
Now, I want to explain to people that when we talk about the high-low mix, that means having smaller ships and go everywhere in a hurry and swarm and having an aircraft carrier. So you're not against carriers of the Columbia class. We just think this frigate, both Congressman Gallagher and I, and I'm a civilian, he's actually not. He knows what he's talking about. I just read what people write about it. It seems to me to be the magic bullet that we need to be everywhere at once, and that we need a lot of them, like the old guided missile destroyers, guided missile frigates that populated the seas during the late Cold War. And we need maybe 50, and we might need a second yard, and there might be a second contract. But you can't get to the second until you award the first, Mike Gallagher.
100%. And here's where we can also start to get creative. Well, first I would note, in addition to those smaller ships and the frigate, the Navy's top ask, or its unfunded priority, was a second Virginia-class sub, which would cost about $2.7 billion. I think you could also make a case for building a couple new hospital ships, given how important we've seen the Comfort and the Mercy in the context of coronavirus. But where you can really start to get creative, since we are no longer bound by the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, is we can start to field intermediate range missiles throughout the Indo-Pacific in general, and in that first island chain in particular, to do sea denial, to start targeting Chinese ships. And that's where, in concert with our allies, we can really start to get more defense at less cost, because we already have these capabilities coming out of SCO and the Defense Department. And so there are a lot of opportunities to do things like putting intermediate range missiles in containers, right? You could scatter Connex boxes all across the first island chain. Some of these boxes would have anti-ship, anti-air, and perhaps even land attack missiles. Others wouldn't. That's sort of in the best tradition of Patton's Ghost Army, where we leverage deception to keep our adversaries on its toes and force it to account for both real and decoy targets. And that's the type of creative, more defense at less cost thinking I think we're going to need going into this more constrained budget environment.
I also think we're going to need the three must-haves in the appropriations side, not the structural federalism side, which I'll come to, are pharmaceutical repatriation. You and Senator Cotton are already working on that. Nuclear cycle end-to-end regeneration, so repatriation, regeneration, and then just refunding of the defense base. Those three R's. I think you're going to get pharmaceutical repatriation. I hope we're going to get nuclear cycle regeneration. Do you think that last one is part? We just absolutely we've given China, the Chinese Communist Party, is building 45 nuclear plants around the world. We are building none, zero.
Well, that's absolutely critical. As for the third thing, Max Thornberry has been leading the charge for an investment in a Pacific deterrence initiative modeled after the European deterrence initiative we've had some success with. But we have to make the case across all these fronts. I might add another area where we have an opportunity not only to strengthen and shore up some of our brittle supply chain, but also to draw closer with a key ally, and that's in the area of rare earth minerals. All of the processing right now is done by China. China has obviously threatened to cut off exports of rare earths, indeed did so in order to hurt Japan in recent years. But our Australian allies, who are among our closest allies in the world, or in the Five Eyes Partnership, have the ability, particularly in Western Australia, to partner with us on next generation rare earth mining and processing technology. The Defense Department has already granted some money to U.S. companies to work with their Australian counterparts. And to me, ideas like that are just a win-win. It's how you marry this economic decoupling from China with a smart play to draw closer to our allies. And so not everything comes back home to the United States, but it does get relocated within the free world.
Now, the structural federalism side of this phase four will be about the strings or lack thereof attached to state and local aid. That conversation is going to be the most important legislative one of my lifetime. Has it begun? Are people engaged in it, Mike Gallagher?
Well, I actually had a discussion with our governor yesterday, and though we're in different parties and have different perspectives, we did both agree on the idea that you cannot include anything that is akin to bailing out states that have been irresponsible prior to the crisis. So think about solving Illinois' pension crisis for it, which has little, if nothing, to do with the current coronavirus crisis we're in. I think you're going to see states like Wisconsin, who have been fiscally responsible in recent years, recoil at that idea. So I sincerely hope that Speaker Pelosi doesn't try and insert provisions like that, which would poison an otherwise productive conversation. Because in a state like mine, where we had a surplus of funds, we had a significant rainy day fund, we are now, as a result of coronavirus, facing a $2 billion shortfall just due to lost tax revenue. But I think that final point highlights what's most important in this debate. Regardless of where we land in terms of this next phase and the overall question of competitive federalism, there just aren't enough federal dollars to cover the cost of staying shut down for 3 or 6 more months. And so you're going to have to encourage states that can, and really it goes below the state level to individual counties and regions, those that can, to move towards that Sweden model as quickly but responsibly as possible. And there are some counties in my district, counties where there are more cows than people, where they can do that more quickly. But in Green Bay, the most populous area in my district, we may have to be a little bit more restrictive in the short term.
Well, I gather Aaron Rodgers is socially distancing from all the Packers, so that's good. I want to close by asking you, Congressman, what is your former Marine Intel officer? You read everything. What do you think is the R naught? What do you think is the mortality rate based on everything you've read?
Well, the honest answer is I don't know, and I encourage every politician to have a bit more humility than they've been exhibiting, because some of what we've been projecting smacks of scientism, and of course we've had terrible projections going back to January when Dr. Fauci was warning us there would be no human-to-human transmission. And so I do think we all need to take a big dose of humility. I think from what I've seen, though, the R naught is around 1, but we have different studies coming out every day. So this is not as high as originally projected, upwards of 3, but it is still 8-10x more than the flu, or at least in the case fatality rate, with much more than the flu. But the honest answer, Hugh, is I don't know. I read the smart people like Ovik Roy and Scott Gottlieb, but at the end of the day, there's just a lot we don't know. And so we have to go forward with a great sense of humility.
Have you read the New York Times story this morning about airborne transmission?
I have not.
Okay, when you do that, that's the bad news story of the day. I will leave you with to go look up Kenneth Chang, Chang, airborne coronavirus detected in Wuhan hospitals. That'll bum you out. Congressman Mike Gallagher, I don't actually know if you're capable of being more depressed than any other Packers fan is already. I mean, I bet he could be the new Steve Young, Congressman, right?
Hope springs eternal in
I mean,
Northeast Wisconsin.
don't even
It could
look
be
at
worse.
those
We could be the
interceptions.
Browns. We
Don't
could be
look
the
at those.
Browns.
It doesn't matter who he throws it to. They'll all be complete. Just the wrong team. Don't